bookworms, did you know that this channel also features a monthly book club? Hit the link in the description box to like, follow, and subscribe. Now back to the show. Welcome back, and thank you for still rocking with us. We are getting into the meat and potatoes of this interview. So New York City Mayor Eric Adams recently released his blueprint for eliminating gun violence in the city. He broke down his solutions into two categories: immediate intervention strategies and long-term prevention strategies. Some of the long-term prevention strategies proposed by Mayor Adams included bail reform. New York State was one of the only jurisdictions that did not allow judges to detain defendants on recidivism. He wanted to work with Governor Hochul to reform this law. And secondly, he wants to reevaluate the raise the age law due to the loopholes that gangs use to push gun charges onto kids under 18. He wants kids facing gun-related charges age 16 and up to be tried in criminal court as opposed to family court. And lastly, he wants to make changes to speed up the discovery process in gun-related cases in order to triage these cases. I'd like to first talk a little bit about judges using their discretion to detain defendants they believe pose a threat to the community if released on bail. As a professor of criminal law and an expert in regulatory law, what are some of the positive and negative effects this change could have?
Well, thank you. It's a great question. And I'd like to address the question first to look at Mayor Eric Adams, who is on the executive side. His job, his focus with his administrative agencies, police, fire department, housing. So Mayor Adams has to look and really come up with solutions to address a myriad of problems in so many areas. We have 53 administrative agencies. It's a lot. It's a city that is very complex. So crime is an issue everywhere, every part of the world that scares people. It's concerning, and it's the job of the mayor of that city to curb crime, to come up with policies and programs to address this matter. So let's put it in context for the viewers who are listening. Eric is on the local level executive. So he had to go to the governor on the executive side because the city is a charter, has a charter, the New York City charter, that's our constitution, to operate. So we can't make a lot of structural changes unless we get permission from the state on doing that. That's why we have a New York City charter revision where we look at how a charter is done. Just a little context with that. So the laws are done by the state legislature because we're talking about state law. If we're at a federal level, we'll be talking about Congress. So Mayor Adams then in his job to tie, there's limitation in terms of what he and his administration can do to address the gun violence, to address the issue of bail reform if he feels, or if the sentiments of the society is that the criminals and the recidivism and repeat offenders are back out on there. Number of our viewers and just the public alone don't have the intricacy understanding of how this works. So therefore, everyone blames the mayor, as they should. Everyone blames the mayor. The mayor is saying, my hands are tied, I have to go to Albany, which is what he did. Same as what he did with the gun issue, the gun control, right to bear arms, a constitutional right to do, the Second Amendment, contract law, manufacturers have a right to manufacture guns. Can't stop those things. So he goes to the president on the executive side, and the president said, well, we got to go to Congress to see if we can change those laws, right? So put that in context. Yes, he did. I don't know if, in fact, the bail reform was really critical in causing. What I read is that data shows that even if, and no murder and no crime should be a thing that we look at it as insignificant. But even if there were 5 murders by guns, and those those defendants were should have been perhaps, let's say, put in Rikers Island on bail. Bail should have been set. The number overall doesn't really demonstrate and show that the problems that we're facing right now, this is what the other side is saying, is due to lack of judges not having discretion, so the law needs to be changed. Well, the governor did give some flexibility. She gave about some changes in what the judge's discretion have. Now, Joanna, you have to understand is that if you have a child that has been killed accidentally or unintentionally by a gun or by set of gang members who are 16 years old, or if you have a family member who's been raped and that person is out afterwards because bail, we eliminated cash bail. Let's look at the argument of those folks who, in their view, they're suffering pain of that loss. But let's look at the other side. Here's where the real problem becomes. Let the audience look at this way. The fact that policies, laws have historically been put on the books that really disproportionately affect Blacks and Latinos and people of color. So number one, folks don't trust the justice system because of these arcane laws that criminalize Blacks, Latinos, Asian. We know that you can look in every jurisdiction, and this is why many of the DA says, nope, we're not arresting for small amount of marijuana. We know that there are folks with 20, 30 years cannot work because they have a conviction of drug because they had certain amount of marijuana, which now today is going to become legal on them. So because we have just treated and created laws to incarcerate Black and brown people and the policies in our criminal justice system, it is so hard now to even help someone like Mayor Eric Adams to really give him and give the legislature a chance to really toughen up on the laws. The other stuff is that we don't want anarchy. We can't have gun touting people. I just saw in the news a little before we started, again, on Friday, shot, accidentally killed the 16-year-old. We cannot run a society. Eric, as the mayor, Eric Adams, cannot run a city with fear. Citizens want to get up in the morning and feel that they're living in a city that is safe. If not, they will leave. Businesses don't want to have shootouts outside their businesses. Their taxes will go up, their insurances will go up, they would leave. So it's a balancing act. And I think what was passed creates somewhat of a balancing act to say to the judges, here is when you can set bail for those that with a firearm, those who were aggravated assault for rape and certain crimes, which a lot of that were in the books already. And I think we don't know the answer yet until we see it. The budget was just passed on Friday, which means Saturday morning. Today is Monday, it's the first day of the implementation of this law. So we would see how it's done. I think that in the end, Mayor Adams got a little bit of what he wanted. I don't, on the other part of your question, I don't like the idea of trying a 16-year-old as an adult. Think about it, audience, 16. You can be influenced by gangsters. You can be influenced by peer pressure. I don't think we put a 16-year-old in an environment where he or she shall stand a crime of to do 25 to 30 years old in life. That 16-year-old need counseling, that 16-year-old need help. So no, I'm not in favor. I don't think it helped. I don't think it even deter. I don't think the 16-year-old knows that, hey, if I get caught with a trafficking or with a gun because drug users are using me as a carrier to do that, I'm going to go charge as an 18-year-old or as an adult. I don't think if they're money exchange and they're making a little dollar, they're thinking about that. So I don't think it helped that child at 18, at 16 to try that child as an adult 21 years old, when we want to help that child and turn his or her actions around and give that child a second chance. That's how I feel on that, right, with the raise the age minimum. I'm against that. The child is a minor.
Could you explain the discovery process to our listeners in gun-related charges or any criminal case, what that looks like? And do you believe that changes to the process and the time that it takes for the discovery process will have the desired outcome of speeding these types of cases through the court system?
Okay, good, sure. And you know, and I'm going to speak from my colleagues who are criminal defense attorneys. I'm not one. I'm a regulatory attorney and I do teach criminal law. But what I hear from my colleagues, Professor Pollard and others who are expert criminal defense attorneys in this great city of ours, is that the discovery laws are unfair. I'm representing a defendant and you know, and I have to bitch and moan to get the discovery. I want to get a photo that was done from the business where it said that my client fired the weapon. I don't have that. The police department has not supported and turned over proper evidence of witnesses on there, and it puts that person that defendant in a bad position as well. So I think that's on one side. On the prosecutorial side, I think it was the defense attorneys was really fair to say that it was wrong. It was unfavorable to put the defendants in that situation where you're waiting 3 months, 4 months for discovery. So this new reform make it whereby there's a timely fashion in terms of how the prosecutor was able to turn over evidence to the defense team, which I think is good. Now, the problem on the other side of the ledger is that if you are expediting that to prosecute those cases quickly, it's unfair on the defendant. It's unfair on the defendant as well to have the right to counsel, to have the right to have a proper representation on there. So the prosecutors on one side, and I know on the administrative side, they want to be able to get these cases out quickly and get these defendants at speedy trial. But I think part of the law that even says you can't even take a plea, part of the new discovery law until, so before you could say, how do you plead? And you know, you heard the term cop a plea. I need to go home, I'll plead guilty. No, that is in a way very good because you have to have the discovery on what am I pleading to, right? A lot of times the defendants don't really understand. And if you have a legal aid attorney, not all legal aid, some public defenders will say, look, you can go home in 24 hours if you just take a plea. It wouldn't, we will try to expunge your record because you're 17 years old in the next 4 or 5 years. That may not be the case. The defendant needs to know. So this new discovery law even puts that in place that you cannot take a plea to defendant until all the evidence. Oh, Joanna, you've been charged with XYZ. You've been charged with felony of burglarizing. You're like, I didn't burglarize that place. Why am I taking a plea? So then that stays in your record. So no more. I think that was some of the good things that are happening in the discovery. And look, we know it's a fight between the prosecutor and the defense attorney, but we're talking about your basic fundamental rights. And again, it should be used that the defendant is able and the defense team have the information to make a proper case if they are past the pre-trial or post-trial and ready to go to trial. They should have all information. And I think part of the e-discovery also talk about if the prosecutor cannot release certain documents, they must send a memo to the defense attorney and of course to the judge explaining why. That if it's a witness maybe in protective witness custody, it could be, I'm giving that as an example, or the reason why the child is a minor, the child is going through some psychiatric stuff now, but the child did see the father commit the crime. So we're waiting for the psychotherapist report to see that first. So any delay, it has to be just not, it's not ready. You have to give a detail, both the prosecution, the police officer in detail on the 30 days or 60 days, why it's taking you longer from submitting the evidence on there. So we need to have a fair system, and having a fair system, a number of the defense attorney has been pushing for this. So I'm in favor for the defense attorneys who really need to have the discovery material, meaning all pertinent documents, evidence, photos, witnesses, ID. The victim said the ID you on their word is the video showed the defendant pulling the trigger. Let me see that video. Let me corroborate that video with an expert videographer. If that is actually the length, and let's look at the lighting in the area to show exactly if this was on a corner of the street as intended. Does this picture really sum up and look like the defendant? No, it could be any other black or brown person on there. What other evidence do you have? to ID my client beside the eyewitness, right? So who's the eyewitness? Let me interview the eyewitness. Let me look at the eyewitness record before. All of these information are important. So again, it's timely that you're doing this, but we shall see what it looks like. And we shall see, and we're going to hear the complaints if it's working or if it's not. And if it's not, expect to see the legislature making more changes towards it, and the fight will continue. If I may just add, what I would like to see is we looked at the shooting in Florida, the school shooting in Connecticut, where 20-something children and teachers died. And you know, I'm talking about those massacre, and they brought civil suit against the gun manufacturers. Our kids, black, brown, blue, or green, are not manufacturing the guns, right? What I would like to see from a public policy perspective is, on the national level, how does the ATF, Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearm, how do we work with the state troopers from New Jersey and state troopers in Philly, those who are trafficking and bringing those guns into the hands of our young kids? The question is, how do we go about it? And law enforcement has a role. We can't have anarchy. We cannot have anybody just shooting and wilding out the city. It will not work. We cannot let our cities be taken over by criminals. That's a fact. But we have to look at the larger picture of how these guns are coming in here. It's the same situation how the drugs were coming in from other parts of the countries, and they're coming into the black and brown neighborhood. Who's bringing them into the black and brown neighborhood, and you're letting those kids use those guns to fight among ours? So we have to stop this social stigma of black and black crime, brown and brown crime, because it's some social scientists argue that it's intentionally done that way for us to kill out the generation of black and brown. If we don't create social programs, wraparound services where the child can able to get a summer job, do you know, I'm shocked at the price to go to a movie theater. How can a 16 or 17-year-old take his young girlfriend or significant other or partner to a movie if he or she does not have a job and relying on his parents alone, maybe from a single home there? Let's find those children and let's give them a job. Let's get them into an apprenticeship program. Let's give them a trade on there. So guess what? They're not going to be committing crimes. You're not going to see them being affected because they'll be making $20 or $30 an hour as a welder, as a carpenter. Let's go back and find ways. Let's create industry in the movie industry, sound engineering. Let's create a program where they can learn how to use recording engineering, or if they're artists, and they're artists, like we have poetry, artists who want to able to sing, and then besides school, let's create a fund and a grant. If they're 16 and 18-year-old, that we pay them a stipend while they go and they learn how to write poetry so they can be like an Amanda Gorman. Why don't we create something to put money in their pockets rather than the hoodlum saying you can make $200 quickly if you do this? You follow what I'm saying? Let's not look at it. Let's look at it of that child that needs to eat. He or she may go upstairs and the mother said the food stamp ended. I don't know where you're going to get money from. Let's be frank, guys. How are we helping that family?
You're right. And I think these programs like the ones you mentioned would aid in the overall goal, which is upward mobility. It's not just about sustaining and being able to have public housing and making minimum wage. The goal is to generation after generation to continue to rise. And the system that we have currently doesn't necessarily allow for that, because the housing and the projects may be readily available, the food stamps may be readily available, but there's no course of action that shows you how to get out of that. So it's like a revolving door, generation after generation, as opposed to teaching each generation how to level up. Hey constituents, I hope you're enjoying the show so far. This episode is sponsored by Ramsey Family Marketplace, a Black-owned grocery store selling healthy and organic products from chefs, artisans, and small businesses owned by people of color. Hit the link in the description box to grab your snacks. Now back to the show.